So first I'm going to go over this section where you need to pick 12 and show your work, because here's the answers. Okay? So this is part 1. So I want to go over, I'll repeat a little bit what I did before. If I had the square root of 25, we know that's 5. But if I have the square root of negative 25, that's like the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 25. The square root of 25 is 5. But instead of writing the square root of negative 1, we just put the letter I in cursive. Okay? So that means the answer is 5i. You got that. But now I'm going to simplify it a little bit. So if I have I to the first, we know that's the square root of negative 1, which is just I. Okay? If I have I squared, that's the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1, which is just negative 1. So when you see I to the first, it's I. When you see I squared, you're going to write negative 1. I cubed. I cubed is the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. Well, we know this represents I squared, so that's negative 1. This represents I. Negative 1 times I is just negative I. So I cubed is negative I. I to the fourth is equal to the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. But this is really just I squared, which is negative 1. And this is really just I squared, which is negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. So I to the fourth is 1. All right, I want to show you something. I'm going to put this to the side. And I want to do I to the fifth. There is a method. I to the fifth is But what I really want you to see is it's just I to the fourth times I, because there's 4 of them, 1 of them. Well, what's I to the fourth? I to the fourth is 1. And 1 times I is just I. So I to the fifth is I. I want you to see I to the sixth, which is really just I to the fourth times I squared. Well, I to the fourth is 1. And I squared is negative 1. So that's negative 1. So I to the sixth is negative 1. I to the seventh is really I to the fourth times I cubed. Now some of you are wondering, why am I keep picking I to the fourth? Well, I to the fourth is 1. So that makes it easier. It's like it's gone. Well, what's I cubed? I cubed is negative I. Dang it. Okay. I to the eighth is I to the fourth, I to the fourth. And that's 1, and that's 1, so that's 1. So what are you noticing that's happening each time? I, negative 1, negative I, 1. Each time you're dividing out of 4. So what if I'm going to move it over a little bit even more? I'll make it smaller in a second. What if I had this time, and make it even smaller, sorry. This time I had I to the ninth. Okay? Well, I to the ninth is I to the fourth, I to the fourth, I to the first, which is just I. Hey, it's I, it's I, it's I. I to the 10th is I to the fourth, I to the fourth, I squared, gone, gone, I squared is negative 1. Oh my gosh, it matches again. So what I want you to see is doing this is super annoying. So what if I just gave you a question where I just said, hey, figure out what I to the 23rd is? One way to do it is go I to the fourth, I to the fourth, I to the fourth, I to the fourth, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 23. And go, it's 1, it's 1, it's 1, it's 1, it's 1. Oh, it's I cubed. What is I cubed? Negative I. An easier way is divide out the 4s, so you just focus on this I squared, I cubed, I to the fourth. So I'm going to take 23 and I'm going to divide it by 4. If you go 4 into 23, you get 5. Doesn't that tell me there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these? But they didn't matter. What matters is the remainder. So what you're going to do, and I promise you I'll give you more than one example, is your focus is what's the leftover. So if I have I to the 41, I'm going to divide by 3. 3 goes into 41. 3 times 13, remainder 2. So the 13 doesn't matter. It's the squared that matters. It's I squared. What is I squared? Negative 1. So my point is that it all comes back to these 4 pink. Because when you look at these 4 purple, it's the same answer. And when you start looking at the blue, it's the same answer. So just divide out the purple and blue and go straight to pink. Okay, let's do one more. This time I'm going to have I to the 16th. Divide by 4. Well, it goes in perfectly, which means the remainder is 0. And if you remember, anything to the 0 power is equal to 1. So I to the 0 is just 1, because it's all 4s. Let's do another one. If I have 3i to the 19th, divide by 3. 3 goes into 19 6 times. I don't care about the 6. I care about the remainder 3. So it's I cubed. What is I cubed? Negative I. So that means I to the 19th is really negative I, but it's times 3. Oopsies, sorry. So negative I times 3 is negative 3i. So what I want you to do, because I'll do one more example. Negative 8i to the 52nd, negative 8i to the 53rd, negative 8i to the 54th. In each instance, divide by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4. Here, the remainder is 0, which means it all cancels, negative 8. Here, the remainder is 1, so it's I to the first power. Well, what is I to the first power? Just I. Divide by 4, remainder 2. That means that's I squared. But I squared is negative 1 times negative 8 is 8. Okay? So I feel like that covers the top half of this. Now, remember I told you could check answers in your calculator? You can't check it because it's imaginary. Let's get to the bottom half. You got to pick 12 from these. You can't just tell me the answer that's right there. You need to show me work. I think I only need to do a couple of these examples. So let me do an example. 8 plus 6i plus 9 minus 3i. So what this reminds me of is if you have a problem like this. 8 plus 6x plus 9 minus 3x. You put the x's together and the number together. That's exactly what you do for this one. So I'm going to continue. 8 plus 9 is 17. 6 minus 3 is plus 3i. You need to make sure you write it in this form. Now I want to acknowledge if this was the blue and you would have gone 6x minus 3x, it's 3x, and 8 plus 9 is 17. When it's an x, when it's quantifiable, the standard form is 3x plus 17. But when it's an imaginary form, come on, imaginary is all backwards. So you need to put it in this form. This is considered standard form. Now I'm going to give you the exact same example, but this time instead of adding, you're going to subtract. The difference is, because it's the opposite, you change the signs of everything to the right. And so 8 minus 9 is negative 1. And look at how I'm showing work here. 6 plus 3 is 9i. You cannot check this in the calculator because I is imaginary. Make sure you put it in standard form. I'm going to do one more complex one, and then I think you guys are good. So let's see, 6i minus 7 minus I plus 3 plus negative I plus 9. Okay? So here's the deal. This one's good as it is, but this one, whenever you have a negative, change the signs of everything to the right. But this is a positive, so it's good. It stays where it is. So I deal with the number first. Negative 7 minus 3 is negative 10, plus 9 is negative 1. Look how I'm showing work. 6i minus I is 5i, minus 1i is 4i. Standard form. Now make sure you get all those homework problems done.